do that.
Are we on? Okay. 7:01, I will call to order the Thursday, January 9th, 2020 regular Board of Selectmen meeting to order at 7:01. Can we have the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, just to let you know that the information on the executive session I was looking to get in is not here, so we will not be having the executive session. If that's why people are so excited to be here, no big deal. Public comments is next, limited to 3 minutes per person. If you come up and state your name if you want to do public comments. No, any public comments? Any public comments? And we're moving on. Announcements and correspondence is in your packet.
Jim, if we can get any farther, I'd like to add the strategic plan commission to our agenda under new business.
I plan on bringing that up in February, but are you making a motion?
I'm making a motion.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
I'd rather wait till February if we can. I'm not quite in a position, I haven't ever even talked to anybody on the SPC yet directly as a liaison, so I think I need a little time personally to wrap my mind around some of this.
Let's add it to the agenda so we can hear why Selectman Betty would like to talk about it, and then we can, we don't need to, I don't think he's asking us to take any action. I think he wants to have a conversation about it.
I think I'm okay with adding it if we're just talking about scheduling or upcoming meetings or where we're going, but nothing, obviously, we can't take any
Right.
action on anything.
Well, I have said that I will put it on the agenda in February, either the first or second meeting, to gather whatever information we need to, what we found and what we know. And so that's what I plan on doing.
Call a vote.
The reason I bring it up is, a lot of chatter in the press. We've got volunteers out there working, and the longer we let it swing in the wind, I don't think it's necessarily fair to them.
Excuse me, can you speak into the mic? I can't hear you. Thank you.
Hello?
There you go.
Yeah, the reason I bring it up is there's been a lot of chatter in the press this week, and we've got dedicated volunteers out there trying to work and putting hours in, and I think they deserve a little clarity on what is going on. So that's why I bring it up.
Anybody else?
I think to George's point then though, and I feel the same way, if we're not prepared to discuss this tonight, let's give them due diligence. If we want to do right by the volunteers and those that are involved, then we should wait and be more fully prepared to discuss this as a board in total. We're talking about waiting until, a month. It's not a very long time.
Okay.
Call a vote.
I'm sorry?
Are you going to call a vote?
I'm just about to call a vote.
Thank you, sir.
All those in favor of adding it to the agenda signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
No?
No?
No, it doesn't carry. Okay, announcements and correspondence is in your packet. Then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Can I have a second?
Second?
Who made the second?
Second.
Seconded.
Jeff, if I might, discussion?
Can we have you want a discussion on the
Yeah,
consent agenda?
I do.
That's not a problem?
I'd like to suggest that we remove from the consent agenda for discussion under, it was here, I don't know where it went. I thought it was under new business, or I guess it got changed from what I looked at online earlier today. Oh, no, no, it's not there. I'd like to remove from the consent agenda the EMS Commission resolution to have a discussion so we could share with the public the process that we went through. I thought in an earlier draft, it might have been that it was on the agenda. Perhaps I'm mistaken, I apologize. But yeah, that's under the consent agenda, though. I thought it was separated, I apologize. So I'd like to, under unfinished business, I'd like to remove the EMS Commission resolution from the consent agenda and add, under unfinished business, a discussion about the EMS Commission restructuring, and at that point, then move, take action. So that's my first question. So we could, and I have one other. Should I offer the other one as well?
Well, let's start with that one.
Yes.
You want to discuss how it was done?
I think, for the sake of transparency, that is not something, after the conversation we had for such a long time, that we should put under the consent agenda. I think it's worth us having, for the sake of transparency to the public, a conversation so the public is aware of the process we went through, the number of candidates that submitted their applications for it, the discussion that was had as we did it, not mentioning any personal, we would never do that. And then move to vote as we normally would. It's been under, we've had it listed under unfinished business, EMS Commission, for quite a while. Anytime we've had updates, this is the biggest of the updates, because we're approving the list of the new structure of the committee. I think we owe it to the town to share with them how we got to these folks, and also offer our thanks to those who offer their application and threw their hats in the ring.
Okay, I have a motion.
A second.
I have a second. Any discussion?
I'll just note, as a procedural matter, for a consent agenda, if someone objects to an item on a consent agenda, it's just normal course for it to, I'm not even sure you need a motion
Right.
to remove it. Also,
Thank you.
I'm not sure, I had a question about this. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where we discuss it, if we discuss it here or
Right.
later on. We didn't receive the materials until today, which is less than 24 hours before the agenda was published. So I actually, personally, just so we get it all right and get these people appointed, I think we need to add it to the agenda. I'm not entirely sure that it's currently something we can take up on the consent agenda. And just so we dot our i's and cross our t's, that's sort of what I was thinking about on that one, because we just got this, I think, like 2 hours ago.
The names.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, the names, yeah.
Or even as an item, it wasn't like,
Yeah.
So
So
that's-
Has to be added under new business.
so as a procedural matter.
I think we'd add it under unfinished business, because we've
I
talked
think you're
about,
right about that.
I think we've talked about the EMS Commission. It's not, I
Yes.
think it'd be
Mike-
added under unfinished
Mike, can you
business.
withdraw your motion?
I will withdraw my motion.
Can I make a motion to add to the agenda the appointment of the EMS committee?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And we'll do that.
And then,
Go
just
ahead.
to
Go
break it
ahead.
up a little bit, I would like to recuse myself from one portion of the consent agenda. That would be voting on Robert Harrison. And so if the minutes could reflect that I'm just abstaining from that one piece.
I have one other thing I'd like to,
We should probably have done this one at a time, it'd have been quicker.
yeah.
Sorry.
But one other thing
So
that
much for
I have a
consent
question, and I'm actually going to suggest I'm not clear why it's being discussed separately. There's section I under new business 3, planning alternate appointment. There's a pretty standard recommendation that's came in more than a month ago to fill an alternate seat vacancy on the planning commission. Under our standard course of business, certainly in the last 4 years, and I think ongoing, I'm not clear
So
why.
are you, so we're,
That's pulled out.
we're on the consent agenda.
I know,
Do you wanna pull
but
something out?
I'm asking, why is that not added? Why, I want to know why that is not part of the consent agenda with all of our other traditional resignations and appointments.
It's not under the consent agenda, so.
But I'd like
We
to
can
know
ask that
why.
when we get to the number 3 in that section.
Then I'd like to make a motion to add it to the consent agenda. I'd like to move from Section 1, new business, number 3, planning alternate appointment, to the consent agenda, something that is no different than every other appointment that we've gone through in the last 4 years together here, and included in the consent agenda.
Normally, I'd second that, but I'd like to hear why it's not in there.
Okay, fair enough. I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, so we're on the current consent agenda, less the EMS, and an abstention on the appointment of Robert Harrison by Selectman Harrison. Call the vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And it carries. Okay, minutes of December 19th, 2019, regular meeting. Can I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
I'll second.
Made, seconded? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Bids and procurements, Plaster House Road. Entertain a motion?
I'll move to approve the purchase at stated price.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Emily seconded. Any discussion?
I just had a question. Does this have, not particularly about this, but whether it's in any way related to the subsequent item on our agenda for the designation of portion of Jeremy Swamp Road as
No.
scenic road, if that's
No.
connected? Okay.
Okay, call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? It carries. Unfinished business under EMS. Do we have a resolution?
Just one more. Yeah.
I'll move to accept the list of endorsed candidates.
I have a
I
second?
shouldn't say candidates, but
Second?
Second.
Second, okay. Any discussion, Mike?
Yes, please. So first, thanks for moving it. For the sake of the public, I want people to know that, what was the final count of number of candidates we got in?
14.
14. Selectman Harrison, Bertram, and I got together as right before the holidays, I think it was. I don't remember.
Between Christmas and New
Yeah,
Year's.
Christmassy time. And got together
I
and
think it was
reviewed.
December 30th.
Yeah, and had good discussion, and had some good discussions, and while I was hopeful we would get, frankly, more, more applications, we were really fortunate to get a good list of qualified candidates. I did have one thing, and we came to consensus after some disagreements and debate. It was well done, and I think we're pleased with the list. I did have one question, though, actually, as I was considering it. I want to make sure that that we're following the letter of the resolution that we had passed to establish the revised EMS committee, and I don't know the answer to it. One of the points we said, we had discussed it on one issue, but we had not discussed it on another issue, is that all regular and alternate members will be citizen representatives independent of an EMS organization that operates within the town of Southbury. I am not clear, actually, on one of these candidates who continues to hold a role with the license for the PSA for Heritage Village, and is still, because that PSA still sits with even though they're not operating with HVA with the now not operating
Training school?
training school, doesn't it?
They don't have a PSA.
They don't have, so that's just
No,
not
they do
assigned
not have a
anymore?
PSA.
So it's no, is that, there's no, it is, so officially, I just wanted to make sure of
Yeah.
that, because that was my one thing, as I was sitting here and going in, and I read the resolution, I was just concerned about that I wanted to make sure we weren't conflicting ourselves, because one of the representatives still has an association with the training school, with the fire department at least. So I just
No.
wanted to make sure there was no
Yep.
association. Then, that issue's off the table. That was my big issue. I will say, and we talked about this, one of the concerns that I brought to George and to Emily was I did have some concern about the lack of diversity on the list of candidates we had. We only received, though extremely well qualified, we only received one application from a woman that I had some concerns about, that it doesn't reflect the diversity of the town. We had some, we chose to move forward. We agreed to disagree, frankly, on some of that as well, and I'm pleased with it. But I do think that's, it's important that we had that discussion. We did discuss it, that, and you'll see as we go through the list, we received, of the 14 applications, one was from a woman. She was well qualified in terms of her background. But I would have hoped that we have gotten it, and we had a discussion about whether or not we might delay and open up the search to give every chance we could to have a more diverse group of candidates, but made the ultimate decision to proceed with this list, and I think we were satisfied with that. So,
Okay.
that's it.
Can I make a motion to amend the resolution so that the references to Emergency Management Services Committee, which appears twice, reads Emergency Medical Services Committee?
Yes.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's why we pay you the big bucks.
I'll second that.
I read it.
Second that.
All in favor of that motion?
That amendment.
We'll,
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries to change that.
Totally
Okay.
different committee.
I'll call,
And I'll just say, while we're discussing this, just to kind of play a little bit off of what Mike has said, is we got 14 really qualified candidates. I know that not everyone reviewed the resumes, but it was a tough decision. I have a lot of confidence in the team that we've put together, and certainly not to take away from those that weren't selected, because this was not easy. And so my thanks to everyone who has applied.
Indeed.
There was a lot of discussion back and forth amongst us, debating the merits of the various candidates, and it was a tough call.
Yeah.
Hopefully we made the right call, but anyone that didn't get through the screening process should not feel like they're
Unqualified.
lesser people or something. Yeah, there are a lot of very qualified people, and it made it difficult.
okay, anybody else? We always want to thank our volunteers and people who come forward. I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? And it carries. All right. Hang on. If I could pass this out, this is liaison appointments that I'm looking to do. So I'm looking, George Bertram on Road Study Committee, IT Steering Committee, Police Radio Upgrade, Cellular Mobile Phone Coverage, Strategic Plan Commission. He was asked to be on the Strategic Plan Commission by John Montleone. Selectman Betty, Economic Development Commission, IPOC and Senior Commission. I would like Selectman Buck's mom on Historic Buildings, Historic Tree, LEPC, and Planning. Selectman Harrison on the EMS Committee and the Library. Selectman Rosen on Park and Rec Commission and Region 15. And I would be on the Board of Finance, Conservation, RUPAC, and the highly acclaimed Southbury Celebration Committee. So those are the appointments I'm looking to do on that. Not big changes. Emily Harrison cannot be on the Planning Commission because her father sits on that. So there's a little bit of a move around, and I'd like to do that. Everybody okay?
If I could just comment on that. You'd mentioned this to me previously, and as I've conveyed to you already, I'll convey to everybody. I have a conflict with the Planning Commission meetings. I've conveyed that to you on a number of occasions, where I would have to miss the majority of those meetings. So I would prefer not to be assigned a liaison assignment to a committee that I can't fully commit myself to. I'd ask that I not be assigned to that. I mean, I'm happy to. Historic buildings and historic tree, we haven't had that one before, so I don't know when are those evening?
They are
Right,
evening.
are they evening meetings? It says quarterly Tuesday, but,
Yeah,
They made a request, they made a request to me, so I guess I cleared it, and they felt that they didn't need somebody to come to every single meeting, Jason, but, you know, perhaps quarterly or so. At least feel they have a connection and they need to,
yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just asking for, I don't like to,
I think-
when I do something, I like to do it, and,
Yep.
you know, I don't want to be signed up for something that I can't do, so I'll check the schedule of those meetings. You know, shouldn't be an issue if they're quarterly.
So what I'll
But
do
I
with the
can't-
planning,
I can't do the planning. I'm
I,
happy
I
to-
would be, I would certainly, assuming, are those evening? Are they evening? Yeah. I'd be more than glad to fill Jason's spot there, because I had previously had three.
so frankly, one of my,
appointments.
and I understand, and I certainly would like Jason's input. We're going to be opening up the plan of conservation and development, and we need to make sure that that's the main reason I think that a liaison, there was not a liaison before, but I think we did have a liaison. We didn't have a liaison then. Selectman Naylor was attending them and bringing back information, which was great. We can cover that if it's not even just that, if you can't make it, Mike, then I'll cover
No, I mean,
the meeting, we can work it out.
I'd
You know,
like to.
You know, another thing I'll mention, you know, if Mike wants to do it, I'm happy to share it, like, we could compare
Yeah.
schedules, and, because there would be a
So we can
couple of
work it
meetings
out.
I could go to, but the
Yeah.
majority I can't, so that's why I'm hesitant to.
Yeah, but I'd be glad to. I think planning commission especially, you know, with some of the things going on here in terms of, you know, vacancies and openings, I think it's important that we, you know, the commission's role is gonna, you know, be critical. It's
And I
critical
also
to,
think that,
you know, with the
in
new
general,
job, yeah.
as a plan of conservation and development,
Yeah.
as we roll into that, it would be good, even if, for all the selectmen to stop in and hear what's going on,
Planning
too,
commission
so-
should have an active liaison without question.
Okay.
And so I'm glad to fill in, and if I can't make it and Jason can on a day, that's great.
Okay. I don't think we don't have to vote on that. That's an appointment. Okay. All right, on the new business scenic road application for Jeremy Swamp Road, not a big deal right here tonight. They're gonna have a, public hearing in April. So at this point, it's on here for your information. It'll be on and if you could, go over it. If you have comments on it, get it to the planning commission, so they can get your input and go from there. It's really not a lot to do on it, but it's out there, all right? Is that okay? All right.
I had one question, Jeff.
Oh,
The section of the road that we're talking about is it's still called Jeremy Swamp Road, right? I mean, there's no
It is one
special
road.
name for it.
That's Jeremy Swamp Road, yeah.
Yeah, so does it have to have a special designation, a different name in order to go through this
I-
process, or it doesn't matter?
I don't know. We're gonna have to get,
That's a planning, I have no, I just wondered about that.
I think on some maps, it's referenced as the extension. I don't know if that's formal or not.
But I don't think it's
No.
formal, and that would be the.
So we're gonna have to get clarification of that, because in the, I think what it says in the regulations, it has to do with the linear footage of your ownership. So if it has to be clarified if it's the total ownership. So if it says it's from Route, that it has to be from Route 67, where it starts, to the end, then I'm not sure it technically meets the, I can't, not from the, I can't. So it is sir, can't. It's we have to get clarification if it's technically the total length of the road as a Jeremy Swamp Road, and I think we have to also be careful that if that's how that is, if it's a portion of the Jeremy Swamp Road, can you designate just a portion of a road as scenic? You'd have to get clarification on that. Because otherwise, let's say, I decide I want to get my road along my farm designated as scenic, and I own both sides of the road for that portion. Can I get that designated just that section? Because that's essentially you're setting precedents. So we have to know whether the technicality of that. So I think that's one concern I'm looking at and would present to the planning commission.
Yeah, I had another one that I wasn't quite sure on, and I know that this section of the road right now is closed, and if we were to move this in as a scenic road, is that then requiring us to do any upgrades to that road to reopen it that would allow cars on it? That's one of the things that I would definitely want to find
very
out
good
and be able to
question,
have a
yeah.
clear answer on before we be able to look at this in
Yeah.
a more detailed manner.
And I do believe, I mean, from the state's own website, there is there's an answer to the question about whether or not you can designate a portion of a road as a scenic road, and according to this, and we'd have to check with council that it still holds true, but it says the DOT commissioner in consultation with DP and DECD commissioners may designate a state road or a portion thereof as a scenic road. So,
That says state road.
that is true. That's true, right.
Right.
That is true. So we'd have to look into that. You're
Yeah.
right.
So we have to look and see what
Yep.
what that means and make sure we're doing, if it is what the
True.
right part is. All
Jeff,
right?
just sort of piggybacking on Emily's comments, I'd also be interested in the difference in whatever, we've been talking about this road for a while now, the road's closed, and some people want it open, and what the difference in those upgrades would be. If it's a scenic road, I assume, and you're required to open it, I assume the upgrades would look a lot different than if it's not, and, there's obviously cost implications with that.
So that's why we have it on here. Let's get the questions and
Yep.
heads together and, put it to the planning commission, that questions that the selectmen will have. And they'll go into a public hearing. We have time for it, so, I mean, it's April, so let's get that out there and make sure we're doing the right thing. Okay, next on the agenda is the planning alternate appointment. This was pulled out for a discussion, on if this is it's up to us to appoint people. We go to the town committees for recommendations for this. This individual was an alternate, and then chose to run as, in the election for a full seat. So for discussion purposes, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
To approve the resolution.
I'll second it.
Made and seconded. So I'll open that up for discussion. So, anybody want to?
I have some concerns with appointing this. We had an election less than 2 months ago, and I've got to look at it, and I look at those election results and see that 60% of those electors that came out that day voted to not appoint Michelle to planning. I feel like if we go ahead and make this appointment as an alternate back to that commission, we're disregarding the citizens of Southbury, the voice that they had in November, and that's just not something that I can approve.
Mike?
Well, I'd like to hear from I made my point. This is, in 4 years, this is the first time it is monumentally distasteful that we're doing this. I'm embarrassed for us as a Board of Selectmen for the first time in my 4 years on this board that we're even having this discussion. More people voted for Michelle Zomer than voted for me. So should I no longer sit here? This is political. It shouldn't be. We've never made it political. In the 4 years we've been here, the SDTC put forth a recommendation. It should be approved.
Anyone else?
There's a chance someone who's an alternate could become a full member. And I would agree with Emily. I think if the people have voted the way they did, and we disrespect their views, I don't feel good about that. I would ask the SPC to perhaps consider nominating another candidate. That would be my view on it. I don't think I would approve it. I think I'll basically agree with Emily's point. I think she said it quite well.
Has there been any discussion with the DTC on this matter, or with Ms. Sommer?
No.
And let it be known that this has been sitting here since December 5th. So I don't know why this wasn't on our agenda for our last meeting as well.
This is a volunteer position. It is not for the town's Republicans to tell Democrats who can volunteer, and it is not for the town's Democrats to tell our Republican friends who can volunteer. I just had this discussion with George about a separate matter. This should be approved.
We are a town, right behind you, Jeff, is a sign, and we stood in front of a sign to take our picture together as a board, that this is a town that runs on volunteers. We are driving people away between what we would be doing here and what we're doing to the Strategic Plan Commission. We are driving people away who are wanting to serve this town. And I'd ask also, to George's point, I'd like us to then review every single commission member that we have, anyone who's ever run before for an office and lost, to see whether or not they are serving in any role whatsoever on any one of our commissions. And I'd ask the First Selectman's office to take that and at our next meeting report back to us. And then perhaps if you're willing to do that, then we should take no action on this. You're trying to set new precedent purely based on politics. It's distasteful, Jeff. We're better than that.
So my fundamental belief, and I think I've probably said this a lot in various arenas, is I believe when you come to a board, any board or commission in our town, including this one, we should strive to act in a nonpartisan manner. We should respect and listen to differing viewpoints. And we should come at it with a goal totally of public service, which is what it is, to the community. Generally, we defer because of that rationale, and I think that's not just a silly thing I like to say. We've actually all campaigned on it. 5 of us have campaigned on it 3 times. 6 of us have campaigned on it once. And we generally defer to the recommendations of the town committees because we don't, different towns do it differently. I think we rely on them to do the vetting and whatnot. And if tonight we appointed, I don't know if the public is aware of this, but we appointed over 50 people to boards and commissions this evening, without discussion, without, none of us, we probably haven't met half the people, never seen resumes, but we're relying on the people that are making recommendations for us to do that. This is a slightly different case. There can be some disagreements about the particular individual, but at the end of the day, I believe it makes sense to rely on the recommendations of the committees as we've done, unless the individual is going to somehow disrupt or harm the process that we're going through in a particular committee. And I think that's what we need to look at. I don't disagree with the arguments made as to the last election. And if tonight, if we received a resignation from a full-time member of the Planning Commission, and 2 months after the election, this individual was up for a full-time member of the Planning Commission, I think we would have to reject that based on the vote of the public. We're talking about an alternate position that wasn't opposed and never would have been opposed, and regardless of who we might want to put up for it, it's a Democratic seat. So it has to be a Democrat in that seat, as I understand it. That's what I've asked, and I think the other 2 alternates are already Republicans on the Planning Commission. So what I look at, and this is what I'd like information on, so it's been brought out, it's been brought up for discussion, and I've come into the discussion with an open mind. 5 months ago, the Board of Selectmen unanimously appointed this individual to this exact same position. Just 5 months ago, there was no discussion. It was on the consent agenda. We relied on the recommendation of the ETC, and we appointed this individual as an alternate to the Planning Commission. So before I'm going to be ready to make a vote, yay or nay on this, since this has been brought up as an issue, I'd like to hear about this individual's performance on the Planning Commission. I'd like to hear about any problems that may have occurred since she's been on the Planning Commission as an alternate, and things of that nature. And I think that's how we should evaluate it. And if we have concerns, we should sit down. Jeff, you should sit down with Ron Pugliese and go over it. We should invite Michelle to come to the meeting to meet with us. But at this point in time tonight, based on what I've heard and the fact that concerns have been raised, I think I'm going to be cognizant of those concerns, and I'd like to hear more. So I'm not prepared to vote one way or another without hearing more information about the performance, because I think that's, at the end of the day, what we need to look at when we're appointing people to a commission.
Doesn't that have to be done in executive session?
It certainly can be. We would have to, it doesn't have to be. It probably makes better sense, like if we're going to, get into that. You'd have to give the individual notice, and it's up to her whether it would be an executive session or public session.
Okay.
I gotta say, this entire process is untoward and so extraordinarily distasteful. It's so unfair to a citizen of our town. It is so disrespectful of the independent body of the DTC. And it is so disrespectful to every single volunteer, regardless of party or if they're unaffiliated, who wants to serve this town. We have not been informed of a single issue for this over time. So now we're going to try to rile up, I'm sure, and manufacture some things that have come up for our next meeting. And it's just, and the same thing, and I'm going to ask the question. If we're going to do this, I want the First Selectman's office to review every single commission member and the history of whether or not this has happened before. I cannot imagine that it's the first time that someone threw their hat in the ring because they wanted to serve the town and there was a seat open and they were asked by either the RTC or the DTC to fill a slot on the ballot. They lost, and then they said, I still want to serve the town. I still want to serve, and I was serving and I was unanimously approved. Why would I do that? If I was this individual, I would be flabbergasted and so deeply insulted. And we are turning away volunteers for a town that is should be desperate to have volunteers step up. And not a single piece of evidence has ever been put before us that should change the way we've behaved over time.
This exact scenario happened to me. I ran for the Board of Finance.
But
I
we
didn't get on.
understand that. I mean, they rejected you, right, of course?
No, they put me on as an alternate.
Yeah.
And I was eventually seated, and I served for 5 years. And I think if you ask all of my Republican cohorts on that committee, they appreciated my service. This is pathetic, guys. Come on, let's go.
So let's work. Let's stop playing games.
I take issue with the criticisms that we're getting here. I think they're unfair. We are charged with putting the best people we can find onto these committees. We want to run the town in the most efficient and best way possible. And this, this attack on the integrity of other board members, I find offensive, frankly. Very offended by that. To say that we're doing something for some low-level political reason, I find offensive. And it's not the case. And if you want to take it to executive session, I suggest we do that.
Fine by me.
All right, so.
I'm fine having that conversation in public, by the way. I just want to be
Do
fair
that.
to, I just want to be fair to
I
our,
think
to our
in
people.
respect to the individuals involved, I think we should.
You've already crossed that line, sir.
I agree with George's statement.
So I can entertain a motion, if that's what you're looking for, or I can call the vote.
I think the motion was already moved and seconded.
Moved and seconded.
Yeah, we did have a motion.
Yep.
All right. I will call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
No,
No.
No.
For the reasons stated, I'm going to abstain because I don't believe we have sufficient information to make a determination.
And it does not carry. All right, first Selectmen's report. All right, we're still working on the budgets. A few more are to come in. We are on schedule and meeting with the department heads. The job posting for the land use enforcement officer has gone out. We're currently working on the land use administrator's position's job description to make sure it's aligned with what we need. And that job position will probably go out next week. As you know, our land use, Dolores Curtis, who's given 30 years to the town, is going to retire at least by the end of March, and we will get someone, hopefully have a transition phase with that. We met with the region on medical insurance pooling. You can expect an increase in medical cost, and you can plan, it's probably around a 10% increase. So that's going to be substantial. 2001 report. There is a report out there from 2001 on the community center. It's a report, if you look at it, it's pretty much deja vu. I would encourage you, if you would like to get it, Noreen has it, we'll get it out to you about so you give you a better understanding of the obstacles that were faced on the community center back in 2001. It's quite a report, and there's a 2012 report that is electronic, and we'll get out to you, because we only had one printed report on that.
Can you have them both emailed to everybody?
Yeah, we'll get them out. We just, today, had to take the whole thing apart, scan it all, and they should be able, Betsy, you can get that out? Yeah. There's a survey for cell phone use in town on our Facebook, if anybody's heard that. And there's quite a bit of activity on it.
I think we're up to 105 responses.
Yeah, and I haven't put mine in, so. So go ahead and look for that and put your input on that. Reports from liaisons?
Can I just ask a question? One of the questions I have is a topic that we haven't talked about in a while. I'm sure during budget season we probably will, but the pool, I know there's ongoing discussions.
We're working
Like,
on that.
is there any update as to the status?
Not yet.
or-
We're waiting for a report from one of the things we're waiting for is a report from the engineer on what we think is about the lowest cost of the Murtha system. It's a Murtha, you can look online, it's a Murtha pool system, it's stainless steel panels, a long story, but we're looking at that to see what that number is coming in. But the costs are coming in frankly, rough estimates, what's it gonna be, of 4.2 to 5 million, which is substantially more than the original ideas of what it's gonna cost. So we need to get the engineer to get that number to us, I hope by next week or two. And I hope by the next board meeting, I'll have some information.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Reports from liaisons, George?
A lot of stuff going on. Some of it's not listed there. A road study, there wasn't any activity. IT was a meeting last night, but it got postponed for 2 weeks. The hot issue there is finding a replacement for Ray. That's gonna become the main driver on that one. The police radio upgrade, we've had a meeting on that. A few people went to Stonington to visit a town that had upgraded to the state radio trunk system. Apparently quite happy with it. Recently, there is a controversy developing on this in town between the fire department and the police. The fire department doesn't want to upgrade, the police do, and that's gonna have to be resolved, and we're kind of working on that right now. I shouldn't even mention that, but that controversy has arisen. Just as to look at the numbers, the police and this is not an official number count, I've heard this, and I believe it's correct. The police get 14,000 calls per year. The EMS people, the ambulance people get 4,000 calls a year, and the fire department gets 800 calls a year, and they consider only about 125 of those calls to be a true emergency. The others are things like, they left the toast in the toaster too long, or the pot is burning on the stove, things that aren't true emergencies, but they still have to deal with them. So in a way, having the fire department call the shots is kind of letting the tail wag the dog, but we still have to consider their needs, and we can't just throw them under the bus. So that's a discussion that's ongoing. Cellular mobile coverage, as Jeff mentioned, a web blast went out, an email blast went out to all citizens who get those, and so far we've had 105 responses. I'd say the purchase is not a great area for cell coverage based on the responses. And there are some other roads too, surprisingly, where people complain that I thought would be okay. We're looking to get the NDAs from the providers. Kevin Russ is working on that. That will give us access to the coverage maps from the providers, and that should be very informative. And we can kind of overlay the complaints on the coverage maps and see if they match up. The other thing that we'd like to do is we actually have equipment. Joe Ruggiero has some equipment, and I believe Kevin has some as well, to go out and check these things ourselves. We can go out and measure signal strength and all kinds of stuff. Another topic that's come up that's not listed here is a reopening of the discussion on using salt brine, and that's I'm not going to get into that, but I just want to mention that it's been reopened. That's it for me. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, Mr. Betty?
EDC and Senior Commission meet next week. IPOC won't meet till February, so nothing new.
We assume that the market's doing good.
Market's doing very well today, particularly.
Wow. Jason?
No LEPC, library met last night. It's actually a number of things that they did. One, the Friends, their holiday sale was successful, and they're starting a half-price sale in the lobby. One of the things they did was they reported on volunteer hours in December, and don't usually do that, and I thought it was interesting. It was the volunteer hours in December at the library were 341 hours from 39 different people. 273 of them were from the Friends, and it's a lot of people, helping out and doing work at the library. That it really is a gem of the town. You'll notice in the entranceway, the parking area, there's a new bollard, new lighting. The website, they're finishing up. They have to do some training, and they should have a date sometime soon when their new website will go live. The librarian reviewed her meeting with you, Cindy and Dan, on the library budget and some of the follow-up questions and some of the issues that were discussed. And the library has has two budget seasons, so to speak. So they did their town budget, and last night they started their gift fund budget review. Their first stab at that, and they'll probably finish that up at the next meeting or the meeting after. Two more things. The benefactors reception is May 20th this year. It's always a great event. We'll all be invited. Encourage you to attend. And they're still talking about doing the human library, which I brought up a number of months ago, sometime in April or May, which sounds like a really interesting concept, and they're modeling it after some other libraries that have done it, and they hope to get that going.
Selectman Harrison?
I look forward to working with the newly appointed liaisons in the future.
With a lot of flood threats that are
If we're not flooded.
Very exciting.
Mike?
Parks and Rec doesn't meet till the 23rd. The one thing I will say, I know that with the new EMS committee appointed this evening, they don't have any dates on the calendar yet. So
Cindy will,
I know we'll get to those folks and get
Yeah,
those
set that
going.
up.
And Region 15's first meeting of the year is on is Monday.
okay. Any other business?
We're up to 107 complaints.
Survey responses.
Survey responders.
Survey
Survey
responses.
responses.
That's the marketing.
No one so far has surveyed that, gee, I'm
Oh, it's good.
getting absolutely great cell coverage. I haven't seen one of those yet. I read them all, too.
And I don't think we talked about this last time, but if we could update to reflect mobile, the correct spelling, adding the E at the end, that'd be
Oh, yeah,
great.
the mobile is like the oil company. Good
Yeah.
catch. That's why we pay you the big
Oh,
bucks, Emily.
It just reminds me of one thing I wanted to mention. You may want to talk to CCM as well about small cell stuff. I'm on a municipal attorney listserv, and there's actually been a lot of discussion of late. There's some presentation that I forgot which firm did, like 2 years ago, that they just circulated, that CCM has. I could probably see if I can find it and forward it to you, that just has information about, issues municipalities are facing, and, property issues and siting issues and, all that sort of stuff that.
They
You might be
were,
interested.
for a while, there was a lawsuit, I think, for municipalities to giving up their position on the polls, basically, where, from the siting, and they fought that, and we won, so that we don't, if we wanted to put our own fiber optic, we have a seat. So, there's there's gonna be a lot of back and forth, and technology is changing as we speak, so, what I'm finding is a lot of times people, it's their cell phone that's not picking the signal for whatever reason, people have had trouble with their cell phones, but.
Have other towns tried to do what we're trying to do, that you know of, or?
Not that I know of. That doesn't mean, but CCM probably has some of that information.
Yeah, I'll contact them.
Any other business? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It carries. Thank you.
Happy New Year, everybody.